The participants are joining now. Starting the broadcast in a minute. All right. Greetings of the day to you. Welcome to the 4th edition of the Online Education Leadership Forum panel discussion series focused on transforming education for human flourishing. Thank you so much for investing your time with us on a work day. My name is Aaryan Salman and I'm the moderator for this panel discussion. In the previous 3 editions of the OELF, we explored whether we are entering a radically new age of learning, can we innovate pedagogy and technology to ensure digital well-being, and whether mainstreaming SEL can ensure effective learning and well-being. Today, we have an amazing panel on education in the times of Corona. Is preparing for peace and global citizenship a priority? Where we'll be discussing the status, role, impact, and required approaches in education to prioritize the preparation of young people for sustainable peace and global citizenship. The recording of the previous 3 panel discussions and the live broadcast of this panel discussion are available both on our website and on our YouTube channel. So you can subscribe to our channel to never miss an important update. Also, we will be sharing relevant and related resources with you within 72 hours of this broadcast. Okay, so we live in an increasingly challenging and uncertain times with enormous challenges, changes, and disruptions to our lives and our profession. It is a moment for us to assume active global citizenship and support those in need. Having said that, I would like to take this moment to mark a minute of silence for those who are in grief and for those who have lost their lives to this pandemic, followed by the ringing of the bell to thank the healthcare workers, our educators, and others on the front line who are carrying out essential roles, selflessly continuing their day-to-day duties inside and outside the home in support of us all. So let's mark a moment of silence. Thank you. Here's ringing the bell. Thank you. As you know, the Online Education Leadership Forum was started with an objective to provide a platform for education leaders to shape, empower, influence, and advance the discourse on, and be a springboard aiding action towards transforming education for human flourishing. COVID-19 has crossed all boundaries that we had built in the past and has re-emphasized that borders are ineffective in countering the many challenges that lie ahead of us, and that we indeed live in an interconnected and interdependent world. What started from a small city in one part of the world has spread to almost every country. Currently, there is also a proposed UN Security Council resolution to declare coronavirus pandemic a global threat to humanity and to international peace and security. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently highlighted this pandemic's potential to increase social unrest, stigma, hate speech, white supremacy, violence, and extremism, which would greatly undermine the world's ability to fight the disease and also threaten global peace, security, unity, and global solidarity. We are witnessing discrimination in accessing health services, the plight of refugees, migrants, and internally displaced persons, and the growing manifestations of authoritarianism, including limits on media, civic space, and freedom of expression, which are a major concern. Educators and school leaders have a seminal role in shaping more inclusive, just, peaceful, secure, and sustainable societies. Through the Education in the Times of Corona online series, the Global Citizenship Foundation and its Council for Global Citizenship Education are committed to support school leaders and educators by connecting experts, practitioners, and educational leaders from across the globe to discuss and share ideas, best practices, and perspectives to navigate and lead through this crisis. So our goal today is that whatever your role is in the education sector, that you will come away with something, a new idea, a fresh perspective, a new strategy that you can apply to be more successful at doing what you're doing best while preparing young people for peace and global citizenship. So here's the format to give you an idea of what to expect. First, we'll take a few minutes to briefly introduce our awesome panelists from Austria, Ireland, India, and Japan. Then I'll kick off the conversation by opening the floor to the panelists. And in the second half of our time today, we'll open the floor to give you an opportunity to directly ask specific questions that you have been thinking about to help you navigate the present and upcoming opportunities, issues, and challenges to be more successful in your role. Please feel free to share your thoughts and ideas in the chat section anytime during this discussion and create a learning and engaging experience for all. Sounds good? Great. Let's get started with the panel introductions. It is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Ashok Pandey, Chairperson of the Council for Global Citizenship Education and the Director of Alcon Group of Schools, India. He is a peace and interfaith activist who is currently building an online learning community to promote the SDGs and global citizenship education. I take great pleasure in welcoming Dr. Paul Nunes, Associate Professor of Education in the Department of Psychology and the Director of Educational Disadvantage Center at the Institute of Education, Dublin City University. Also, Dr. Paul is the Affiliate Professor at the University of Malta Center for Resilience and Social Emotional Health. With over 100 publications in the areas of education, psychology, philosophy, law, anthropology, and social policy, he has given lectures and presentations in 29 countries. His reports on social emotional education, early school leaving, multidisciplinary teams, and bullying have been published by the European Commission. It is my deepest pleasure to welcome Monika Froehler, CEO of the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. Monika is a passionate changemaker who was entrusted to create the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens, a quasi-international organization. She has earlier worked with the United Nations, the European Union, the Austrian Foreign Ministry, and in field missions across the globe, and she continues to impact hundreds of women, young people, and communities all over the world, making our world a much better place. It's my pleasure to welcome Alesse Freitas Nunes, a research scholar in the Faculty of Education at the Soka University, Japan. Alesse's research explores peace and happiness in sustainable development education through the perspective of value creation. Also, he's a UN SDG content creator and has worked in the UN SDG Action Campaign. Alesse has a background in social responsibility, journalism, and international peace studies. It is my pleasure to welcome Deepti Singh, a global schools program advocate at the UN SDSN for youth in Japan. Deepti is a peace scholar from Soka University and has been facilitating the implementation of SDG education and global citizenship education across schools in Japan. Also, she is a program manager and coordinator at the Global Summit Japan. I take great pleasure in welcoming Kuany, the in charge of UNESCO MGIEP's Youth Waging Peace program, talking across generations on education, or TAGE, and the overall prevention of violent extremism through education coordination. Kuany is also a trainer for UNAOC's Young Peacebuilders program for the Middle East and North Africa. He's the author of The Enlightened Darkness, an intimate meditation on the causes and consequences of Sudan's civil war. He's using the book's proceeds to support girl education in South Sudan. I would like to thank all the panelists, attendees, and viewers across platforms for advancing the discourse on transforming education for human flourishing. Now I open the floor by requesting Kuany to make his opening remarks.
Thank you, Aaryan. I should say thank you, brother Aaryan. It's a pleasure to be here, and you and I have got to know each other for about a year now, I think, and I appreciate your passion. I appreciate what you are trying to do, and I applaud you as well as a great example of what young people should be doing. So kudos, my friend. And thank you, my fellow panelists as well. It's a pleasure to be sharing this panel with you as well. And to the viewers listening, greetings from my tiny little room here in New Delhi. And before I proceed, of course, I want to pause and recognize a lot of people that have suffered because of the current pandemic, whatever they are. And thank you for that 1 minute of silence. And I share my my empathy as much as I can to those who are suffering at this moment as a consequence of the corona pandemic. And those who are, of course, at the forefront of doing whatever it takes to try and push back, I applaud and celebrate them as well. Now, this is a fascinating topic. It's broad, and even when I was trying to wrap my head around it, I had a lot of difficulties. And so I thought maybe, having been tossed to the front by Aaryan, what I thought I would do in the next 3 minutes is at least try to tie down, at least in my opinions, what we mean by some of the core terms informing this panel, at least in my opinion. And then maybe some of my core panelists could begin to unpack them as we go along. First and foremost, according to me, peace, of course, is broad. Sometimes it is defined in so esoteric terms that it becomes very difficult to tie to the ground, to try and make sense of it, to try and see how practically can one go about cultivating or building peace for that matter. I conceptualize it, or my conceptualization of it is informed by Aristotle, and then, of course, by everybody that came after him, from the idea of eudaimonia to what Martin Luther King referred to as peace as justice for everybody, to what the veteran distinguished peace researcher Johan Galtung referred to positive peace as the absence, not just the mere absence of violence and conflict, but the absence of cultural, structural, as well as direct violence, and also the integration of society in general. To what at MGIEP, at least, we try and now refer to as flourishing for the highest number of people as much as possible. The Institute of Economics and Peace has also built on from this progression by trying to what they call the peace index. Might not be the perfect summation of what peace is, but at least it's a good practical steps towards that. But it looks at around 8 core indicators, which I will not go into. But the progression is that slowly by slowly we are beginning to bring peace to the ground, to bring peace to what we could do to try and build bridges between people. I look at education in a much similar way as well, as the cultivation of the skills, the pertinent intellectual, emotional, as well as character-related skill necessary for one to coexist peacefully within an expanded tribe. And you can see a logical progression to my understanding of global citizenship as an expanded tribe that transcends individuals, that transcends small groups to embody or embrace humankind as well as beings and the entire planet at large. So to tie all the three together, at least for me, educating for global citizenship is more or less educating for peace, because you're just trying to cultivate the pertinent skills necessary for as many people as much as possible to coexist harmoniously within an expanded tribe. Now, expanded tribe is important, at least in my opinion, because we as human beings are very tribal, and we see these across divides. We see these across socio-economic as well as political divides. And so the challenge is, can we grow that tribe such that it includes as many people as possible? So these at least are my working conceptions or conceptualizations of these very pertinent terms. And to now answer the question, should it be timely? Should it be a priority? For me, absolutely, it should be a priority. Is it a priority at the moment? Not so. It isn't. Governments and a lot of people are trying to do whatever they can to survive Corona at the peril of pushing away pertinent interventions like educating for coexisting within an expanded tribe. But it should be a priority, because what else would we need? What else would we ultimately need other than for young people to have the ability to coexist harmoniously within an expanded tribe? For me, that is the end goal. Flourishing and well-being for as many people as possible is the end goal. And if we accept that is the end goal, concurrently or concomitantly with the economics and political innovations that are coming every day, we should also keep pushing the boundaries of building these pertinent skills within the classroom. I'll get into what I'm trying to do, or what my organization, UNESCO MGIEP, is trying to do, but it is just to try and cultivate these pertinent skills among kids, so high school students, and also among young people by creating spaces where they can connect with each other. It is also, I hope I still have my 2 minutes, so it is also a priority because Corona has highlighted, it has resurfaces, just like most transformative changes. Most of the time, they resurface the not so good parts of our humanity. And so we've seen rise in xenophobia, we've seen rise in hatred, we've seen even political leaders calling it, say, for example, it's a Chinese disease, for example, and things like that, which are totally unacceptable. And so for me to see these things resurfacing because of the Corona is, or at least should be, a reminder that we need to build competency so that people can begin to see that this is a challenge to our humanity at large, and should therefore provoke empathy for as many humans as possible, even those not proximate to where you come from, for example. And lastly, to finish off, I also think that, of course, we are seeing the not so good part of our human nature resurfacing, but we should not give publicity, we should not give expensive publicity to few incidences of xenophobia or racism, when we should also celebrate a lot of humankind's acts of kindness that are transcending themselves to try and do as much as they can for other people. We should equally celebrate and applaud these very, very important acts of kindness in the times of Corona. But of course, we should also, this is not to say that we should, push the xenophobic ones under the carpet, not at all. We should, in fact, tackle them head on, and hopefully we use them as a reminder to make initiatives such as this, as well as GCED in general, a priority for as many people as possible. I will stop here for now. I will get into the details as we progress, but thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kuany. I yield the floor to Deepti.
Okay, so thank you so much, Aaryan. So first of all, a very warm welcome to all the panelists and the participants out there. Hello, everyone. Konnichiwa and namaste. So the topic for today, education in the times of Corona, is peace and global citizenship a priority? I think it's personally very close to my life, because I didn't know that the moment I'll complete my master's on this topic, that global citizenship as educational priority to achieve SDGs, this pandemic is going to arrive. So I feel the time has really come for me personally to see the implementation of this topic that is really the global citizenship education, the need of an hour right now. So well, in my opinion, the research like that I've done in the last 2 years, like irrespective of the current pandemic, I personally would like to say that yes, peace and global citizenship education is right now is needed. And I think the COVID-19, this pandemic has established that. And we have undoubtedly been we have all have been affected, and our all lives are being affected. We have felt hopeless. We have been feeling homebound and fearful of our future. I am jobless and I don't know whether I'll get a job in the near future. What will I do? And I think these are the feelings we all have been feeling. So I think there are two questions, especially when it comes to education. Obviously, there are many sectors which are being affected: aviation, hospitality, education. But keeping the education the center, as to this panel, there are two rising and urgent questions which are raised. So first is, how can education be continued during a global health crisis like now and play a role in mitigating the virus? So, and the second question is, what is the role of education in preventing the future pandemics? So I'm not sure if everybody knows, and the root cause of this pandemic. And there have been different theories coming into picture that China did it as a bioweapon, and there have been different. But as per the UN and this pandemic is a zoonotic disease which transfers from human to animals, and it comes from various factors like excessive deforestation, cutting of animals, the animal agriculture, the excessive lifestyle that we are living, and misusing the land and the animals, and climate change. So to address the first question, that education can be continued, how can it be continued? So I feel that to schools right now, they are going online, and the teachers and parents and everyone, they are going all out in a very creative way. They're using technology at the utmost. But I was just wondering that I was talking to one of my nephew, and I feel is a privileged one. He's 7 years old, and he has all the infrastructure. He has iPads, so he's able to at least continue with the classes. But what about the children who are not able to? And as per UNESCO, when I checked the records, as per March 16, 777 million children and the students, they have been forced out of schools. And universities, like in a total of 100 countries, with 85 government schools going completely on a lockdown, like they have been closed, and 15 other, they have been imposed a localized school closure. So this is like the latest information which is being shared by UNESCO. So what about these? But if we consider and we see the governments and the educators, they are still working on this section of society. What I'm more concerned about, which relates to this today's panel discussion, is the second question, which is that what is the role of education, and especially like global citizenship education, in preventing the future pandemics? So I think the most importantly, it goes back to the question that what is the purpose of education? So I want like Aaryan, if he can share the slides. I prepared some slides. Aaryan, are you there? Okay, yeah. So just can you go a little forward, one slide forward? So when it comes down to like really understanding that what are we teaching, what are we preparing our kids for, like what is the purpose of education? Like if we just want to see the purpose of education, can you go forward, Aaryan? So as educators and parents, like it just brings me to question that are we like preparing our children to get market ready, or are we really making them to develop the social emotional skills which are missing these days? And it brings me to question that are we providing our kids with cognitive skills and just focusing on learning and gaining knowledge, or are we really trying to build up the wisdom? Are we helping them to understand, to respect the dignity of not just humans, but the animals and nature also, or we are just making them work well with technology and machines. So I think when I was tracing back and coming to the heart or ethos of global citizenship, all these questions really came in my mind, that what is the purpose of education? So, and it brought me to two leading thinkers from India and from Japan. Aaryan, can you go 2 slides forward? So I would like to quote Rabindranath Tagore, like a poet, and he said that the highest education in which is that which does not merely gives us information, but makes our life in harmony with all existences. So who is going to teach us this harmony, that how to live in harmony with all existences? And one of the cause of this pandemic, we cannot deny, but we have really been not in harmony with nature and the animal kingdom. We have been using it, harassing it, and which has led to this time. And then second, I would like to quote another thinker who is the founder of Soka University. And he says that the essential responsibility of education is to foster in the minds of youth a love for humanity and a spirit to dedicate oneself for the sake of the people and society. So it just brings me to question that the kind of education we are thinking right now and talking about global citizenship education, in which one develops the wisdom to understand the interconnected of life and environment, in which one develops the heart of imaginative empathy, that not just where I'm living, I'm able to empathize with people, not with of my family, but with the people from around the world, the refugees, as what Kuany also mentioned. So I would like to show like few pictures which are from China and India, which shows like the before and after of COVID, because I didn't want to I just want to focus that what the life will be after coronavirus. This definitely is going to end. I want to talk from the positive side and for how we will be after this. So as we see, there is a lot of sunny side things up of corona, which is the pollution level has gone down, the water. So this is from India, is the scene of a Yamuna river. And without any efforts, right now, in just 2 months, the water has become clear. So these are like few of the sunny side things up. And then coming to the global citizenship education. So this is the role of, I think, global citizenship education. And over the last 2 years, whatever my research has concluded, that this has the power to develop a heart in a kid, and value and attitude, that they will not just live in this world with a mind of neoliberal, that I just want to make power, I just want to get a job, but they will live in harmony with their existence, as what the two thinkers I mentioned, they said. And these, like the next slide, can you go, Aaryan? So these were like the concluding themes of my research. One of the thing that came forward, I've just attached it here, but I'm going to share it in my resources. And the last thing I really want to feel, that we cannot go back to the normal. So we all desperately want that this pandemic should get over, and we want to freely go out and eat the street food and do everything, and go back to our lives. But personally, I'm worried, and I want to use this time that of worry to take it as a time of construction and do something better, so that when I go out in the world, I don't go with the same mind. I live in a sustainable lifestyle. I have myself switched to vegan meals. I have completely stopped drinking dairy, and I'm using different sources and trying to understand what can I do, how can I change my lifestyle. And I think this change is in itself is a heart of a global citizen. And this education is nothing but, it's for everyone, not just for the kids, to understand, oh, this world is something which is created by my actions and behavior. And this pandemic is nothing but created by my actions and behavior. So how can I change this? It's understanding that simple concept of interconnectedness of life and environment. So I would like to I will not take more time, and will just like to conclude 3 things that in this time, how can we leave no one behind, including the nature and animals, that we cannot afford to leave anyone behind. And second thing, how can we use this as a time of construction? Instead of feeling remorse, sad, what will happen of my future, we'll be fine. We have come out of World War I, II, and so many things. So this we can sail through definitely. And the third thing, whatever we are learning from like this conference, how can we advocate about it? It's very important right now to spread the word out, because most of the people, like if I go to my family, my nephew knew about SDGs, but his parents didn't knew. So it's very important right now that teacher, parents, and the kids both go hand in hand and understand about sustainability and the heart of a global citizen, so that we don't go back to normal. So sorry for taking long time, but thank you so much.
Thank you so
That's
much,
all from my
Deepti.
side.
Alesse, I request you to make your initial comments, and I will request you to be within 5 minutes. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, dear panelists, thank you all. So I'll start. I want to share my screen just to show some slides. It's a big pleasure to be here with you all now. And I just want to show some slides and to make some comments. Then my starting point here is exactly, I have 5 points. Firstly is a model for global citizenship education. And I used this during my research in my master's degree together with Deepti. And our master's was in peace studies here at Soka University in Tokyo. And then my conclusion was searching for a model in order to apply global citizenship education. That's what was my goal. And my first point is that the world has entered the sustainable development era. Then that's something that I believe. And more than ever, this beginning of our decade is this big challenge with coronavirus. Then we need to rethink a lot of things. Then it's a big challenge for all of us. And so in my research, I connected the 3 SDGs and education and lifelong learning and sustainable development education, global citizenship education. So my conclusion was this multidimensional cosmopolitan dialogue, or a model in which dialogue is in the core for achieve SDGs. A kind of dialogue that is based on cosmopolitanism or global citizenship in multi-dimensions based on from your local community to global levels. So that's the one picture of this model. I'm using courage, compassion, and wisdom as the starting point for people to unleash their potential, and then go and starting to have dialogues to influence and to change local communities until big dimensions as SDGs, for example. And then my research was based on analyze Dr. Daisaki Keda's peace proposals, because he truly believes in the power of dialogue as the path toward peace. Because from dialogue, by dialogue, you can create waves of transformation, and I like this idea, and change realities. And this is a very good, very interesting point about peace and about global citizenship. So I have some data, but basically that students, I compare 4 universities around the world, they naturally consider themselves as global citizens. That's the conclusion of this graphic. And the next is the 2 universities, they have a learning environment based on global citizenship, so that their level of empathy is changing, empathy for international people. Universities that don't have this kind of environment, the level of empathy is decreasing. Then this is just one finding that I consider interesting to show today. And so about coronavirus effects, we have today 1.338 billion students being affected for this pandemic. This is one big issue. And this, in May 2020, this month, some days ago, UNESCO launched this book, or this ebook. And then I just want to share that what UNESCO is thinking now is about some words they are using is interesting for us: social mobilization, engagement of individuals, families, and communities in self-isolation, and mutual caring, solidarity, empathy, appreciation of our common humanity. Then it's interesting, they are using words that we from the global citizenship field, we always use these words, and now they are seeing that that's the solution for this kind of problem. And again, we need to rethink our social policies, including education. This is very important because we have problems of inequality, poverty, exclusion, and these are big issues for our times. And Professor Fernando Reimers is talking about this pandemic will reshape the education landscape and the future for the next decades to come. Then it's very, very important we have time to talk and to debate about this topic. So a framework from my research is exactly we need to counter this feeling of powerlessness and disconnection that we are living now, and talk about the power and the responsibility to change our world in local and global scale. Then from Dr. Ikeda again, the three points in his proposals for education for sustainable development is to learn, to reflect, and to empower. And these 3 points are quite interesting for us to understand our time and to have education based on these points to provide educational in these challenged times. So concluding about my experience here, I'm here in Tokyo, and I'm doing my PhD in education. At the same time, I'm teaching kids here in Tokyo. And teaching kids is not easy personally. Online is harder than personal, but it's quite interesting that we are doing, the professors of the school I'm teaching, we are doing our best to have creativity, empathy, technology, and panda hats and etc. Everything we can in order to make our classes better. And I have one example, this boy, he's 4 years old, he's autistic, and it's not easy for him to have personal classes, but interestingly, online classes for him is being better because he can focus more, etc. That's quite interesting. So to conclude, I want to show that today I had one interesting class, and then I want to show what we need to do in order to have creativity and everything. So that's just a very short here. This is what we need to do during pandemics for students: dance and do a lot of things. She's 3 years old from my class. Yes. Then thank you for sharing these points about global citizenship. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alesse. I yield the floor to Professor Paul.
Thank you, Aaryan. The Paris Declaration in 2015 is a major document from the European Commission that was to address the issue of peace in response to the terrorist attacks in Europe around that time. And I want to hone in on one key feature of that Paris Declaration from the Council of Ministers in the European Commission, which was that it recognized that inclusive societies are peaceful societies. In other words, the injustice of poverty and the injustice of discrimination are two exclusion factors that we have to address. We want to have peaceful societies and also peaceful education systems and promote peace in our education systems. So as part of that, we need to look more widely at society about our social contract, to reinvigorate our social contract, to ensure that everyone in our society has a stake in that society, can participate in that society. And the pandemic, I think, invites that question for us to see who has been excluded at that level. I'd also hone in here on exclusion is not on marginalization, as well as the concepts of inclusion, but these are all spatial concepts. And this is what I want to emphasize in the presentation today. And so, Aaryan, if you could put up that first slide. What I'm arguing here is that it's not only about trying to avoid violence, but to promote peace as active systems in some way. So, Aaryan, if you have that first slide there on the on concentric and diametric space as a notion. Thank you. Okay, so what I'm arguing here in a lot of my work, building on the work of the anthropologist Levi-Strauss, is that there are two fundamental structures that we can observe cross-culturally, and we need to see how these can apply in systems. So one is diametric spatial systems, which are, and then the other is concentric spatial systems. So my argument is that if we want to create peaceful education systems in societies, we need to promote concentric structured societies and education systems, not diametric oppositional ones. So a key contrast between diametric and concentric space is that diametric space is an assumed separation between the two halves. In contrast, the concentric space coalesce around a common center. So both poles are embedded and connected with each other. So concentric spatial relations are ones of assumed separation between the inner and outer pole. Again, Levi-Strauss notes that diametric space is a mirror image symmetry. So when if you look at yourself in the mirror this morning, you did not see yourself, you saw your face inverted. You were brave enough to do so. So what you would see there is that a mirror image inversion means that you have good versus bad, above versus below. You create these diametric spaces of mirror image symmetry that Levi-Strauss identified with diametric space. So we need to restructure our education systems away from these sharp divisions and splits of mirror image symmetries of reversals into us, them, above, below, good, bad, powerful, powerless. We need to change these types of reversals to move away from diametric oppositional systems in education and society. Also, a third feature that Levi-Strauss observed was that concentric spaces or systems are more interactive with the background or the community or background stimuli. Diametric space is a closed system, shut off. The split between both halves also interacts with the background. Aaryan, if you can move on to the next slide. Okay, so we need to create education systems for peace building that are not ones promoting diametric space as bricks in the wall, not what I call the tangled web of system blockage. So we need to move away from assumed separation, splitting, closure, a hierarchy of mirror images of above, below, us, them, good, bad. We need to challenge our diametric spatial thinking and modes of being to move towards more concentric modes of connection, openness, fluid two-way communication. Previous speakers talked about an expanded tribe and wider sorts of empathy and waves of transformation. These are all fluid notions of how expanding our circle of identification for peace is part of our structure of experience. We need to work on our concentric structures of experience to expand our awareness for these modes of being and to challenge our walls and bricks and splits and hostilities of diametric space at our individual experience level, as well as at our level of the of school systems and society systems. I'd also hope that this would have some resonance in more Eastern cultures as well. You know, the mandala symbol is a concentric structured symbol. Also, yin and yang can be seen as an interplay between concentric and diametric space in Chinese culture. So these are genuinely cross-cultural patterns that are not just structures, but spaces that we need to look at when we want to reconfigure education systems. So the argument is that we need to create concentric spaces for schools as safe havens, and to create schools as microcosms of the wider societies we want to create. So concentric, connective schools, warm relationships, deconstructing hierarchy, voices of students and power relationships being shifted so that we can create a genuine dialogue, a two-way dialogue as part of concentric modes of communication. So concentric space is a relational space. We need to change our relational spaces away from diametric space, and this requires communicative skills. So diametric and concentric spaces are modes of communication, and so our peace communication needs to look at how we are creating and constructing our relational space. Okay, moving on then just to the wider question of, well, what is education for in the coronavirus? Again, you're looking here at making sure to prioritize life skills, life capacity, modes of being, as well as peace building dimensions of that. Our schools are being restructured in space currently with social distancing, but we need to look at this as a wider spatial questioning. But relational space is also embedded in our physical space. So how do we create spaces as safe havens for students in our schools, especially vulnerable students? I'd also raise the question about if we're going to reconfigure space in our education system, outdoor education. Outdoor education has, is going to maybe become more prominence now, given the social distancing. This brings cooperation skills, team building skills. We need to sort of see how we can use the outdoors and nature, as was emphasized in previous speakers as well. How can we embed our schools in nature? Because our schools are very often, extracted from nature into these artificial walls and bricks that we need to change. So we need more organic schools in the very physical infrastructure of the school itself. Also, in terms of you're talking about, violence, one issue that I think is a concern is coronavirus is going to highlight or accentuate anxiety in many people. So how do we confront anxiety? I don't think we can eliminate anxiety. Anxiety is maybe part of life and our human existence. But what we can do is in some ways ensure that the responses to anxiety are not ones of violence and aggression. So we need to find other pathways for people to express their anxieties and fears than through violence and aggression. That may also include teachers cannot do all of this by themselves. We need multidisciplinary teams or emotional counseling supports where people can express the complexity of their needs and the trauma that many have experienced prior to coronavirus and perhaps during the coronavirus. The waves of grief and loss, these need system-level supports in and around schools, and teachers cannot be therapists. They can be mentors, support figures, and listening figures, but we also need the therapeutic supports linked with schools. The final point I want to particularly emphasize is something from our own reports with the European Commission, where we have tried to argue that early school leaving prevention, and which is an inclusion issue, of course, and bullying and violence issues are two sides of the same coin. That with common system strategies, both at national government level and at whole school level in schools, that you can design school systems that are inclusive, that are non-violent, that can prevent bullying, but also can keep and motivate young people to attend school. So a lot of the issues around early school leaving and school bullying can come together with common solutions. And these include a positive, warm school climate, warm relationship building approaches where students feel listened to and included in the school. I would say that in many ways you could say early school leaving, which is a flight response from school. Violence in school is a fight response in school. So we need an integrated system response to promote inclusive systems to address both of those issues as part of a peace building approach. So of course, both of these issues also require the voices of our students at primary school level as well as post-primary school level to hear what are the issues that matter to them that may be alienating them from school. So the interconnection between early school leaving and bullying needs to be firmly addressed by every school in a school strategy as part of a peace building and communicative processes and practices that we need to promote. I would also emphasize, and we do in our reports for the European Commission that I think will be available for viewers afterwards, is that these also require not only a school system focus for concentric relationships, but also a community system, a local community system focus that we can create and model these constructive modes of communicating and interaction, as well as a family support dimension, a parenting support dimension, where we need all of these aspects as part of a holistic strategy. It may mean we need to bring government ministries together to combine health and education ministries and social service ministries in our strategic planning. But we can, but a lot of the same issues for early school leaving and for bullying can have common solutions as part of this peace building. So we need to move away to conclude from diametric spatial systems that alienate our students from the school system and invite them to leave the school. Very competitive, us, them, winner, loser type models of systems. We need to create inclusive systems that motivate people not only to be in school, but then to communicate well and connect with others in the school environment. So peace building is an active process of promoting inclusive, concentric relational space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Paul. I yield the floor to Ms. Froehler. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to speak after so many very insightful panelists, and indeed my perspective is very similar, so I will pick up on some of the points that have been mentioned before. I am the CEO of the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. You might know Ban Ki-moon is the former Secretary General of the United Nations, and he could have chosen any subject matter for his legacy to be the focus, and he chose global citizenship. He chose it because he said that we only have one planet, and it's planet A. We don't have a planet B. And we only have a plan A, we don't have a plan B, and our plan A are the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's natural that the Ban Ki-moon Center is very much focused on supporting women and youth to thrive. So how does that then translate in times of Corona crisis to our everyday work? And I want to tackle that, but give you a bit of a background of our understanding of global citizenship before that. And it's very much aligned with what has been said before. So global citizenship, no matter if it's in the pandemic mode or outside of the pandemic mode, and education for it is definitely crucial. Is it already a priority of the globe? I'm afraid no. Should it be? Absolutely yes. And I will give you the reasons why. Before, I will want to dwell on something that Deepti said before. Global citizenship means hand, heart, and basically also brain. So it's head, hand, and heart, if you wish. It is about global citizen values, that's the heart. It's about this 21st century skills. This is about the hand, what we need. Of course, it's beyond the hand, but it's what we need as skills to be practicing. And it is obviously about the head, about our knowledge of things. So it's about the SDGs. It is knowledge on the SDGs. And only if these three dimensions find manifestation in education, we will be equipped to retain our plan A and our planet A, because otherwise we will, unfortunately, I'm afraid, fail as humankind. But we're not as negative, quite on the contrary. In the Ban Ki-moon Center, we believe we can do it, particularly with an audience like you are, and with panelists like we have heard before. And yes, there are massive challenges. And the challenges are even heightened now during the times of the pandemic. We see massive unemployment. We see an economic downturn that is sometimes compared to the Great Depression. We do see that there is a lack of collaboration, of international collaboration. We're not tackling this thing together, we are tackling it in clusters, or sometimes even just on a nation state level. And we do see that we have travel restrictions, insecurity, rising fear. So all of these subjects we are absolutely confronted with. Education, as it stands now, is it equipped to respond to that? And I truly believe that we are presented with an amazing opportunity. This amazing opportunity lies in the change of the educational system, exactly like Professor Downs said, away from this diametrical to a concentric to an inclusive education. And we are given the tools for it. We have them available. And now in a tremendous development over the past couple of weeks, we have used these tools, and almost every ordinary citizen on the globe who was connected to the internet got acquainted with Zoom calls, with Microsoft Teams, with Google Hangouts, with WhatsApp chats, with whatever devices are out there. And it equips us better to deal with exactly this synergetic move of hand, heart, and head in a globalized world. Of course, education is still very much coined by, I would call it the Humboldt way of frontal education to a class, and by testing knowledge that is filtered into students who have to replicate what they learned before. That will change, and hopefully we can use Corona as a time period to really accelerate the developments that have already been laid in GCED and in UNESCO for a couple of decades. What the Ban Ki-moon Center is doing concretely is we have invested into online classes for some time now already. These online classes are available on the SDGs, on women empowerment, but also on what is global citizenship and how do I as a person relate to it. And of course, we are a small player in this overall field. UNESCO has amazing online resources, so does SDSN and the SDG Academy. If you're interested in these subject matters, click on the courses, learn more, inform yourself about it. Secondly, we are, as Ban Ki-moon Center, supporting lots of fellowships, scholarships, and also mentorship programs. We can continue to do those, and we do right now in these couple of weeks online. And for example, in the fellowship program case, our fellows, once they were physically trained already in the last year, and now the physical training obviously is a bit difficult, but there are pre-fellowship preparation times and there are post-fellowship efforts that we can undertake, even if the physical training hasn't yet taken place, because we can substitute some of that with online calls and with incentivizing. And what happened in the past couple of weeks was really our fellows were entrusted to implement so-called SDG micro projects. So we made them think about a challenge that they have in their own community and find a solution for the challenge, and it shouldn't cost a lot. It merely can be an idea of how to fuse forces with friends of theirs and how to do something about it, because global citizenship is all about activism. So we inspired them to do that, and I know that Aaryan has fantastic examples also with the Global Citizen Foundation, where schools are stepping up, students are stepping up to really solve challenges that they find in their local communities. And this is exactly what it is about. We did the same thing with our mentorship program, where we are mentoring young Muslim ladies with experienced career women. And these young ladies, together with their paired mentor, are finding ways, solutions to SDG problems. And they can range from recycling to gender equality to water and sanitation, but something they glow for and something they really want to thrive in their local community. Similarly, we have done it with the Global Citizenship Scholarships. Needless to say, we're hoping for the face-to-face interaction eventually to happen, but until then, many things can be done. And we are priding ourselves that more than 70 beautiful SDG micro-projects have come about in the past couple of months that are all monitored not only by the Ban Ki-moon Center, but by many of our partners that we are collaborating with. So it is possible in these times to particularly push to the fore, as Professor Dowen said, the concentric, the inclusive mindset over the diametrical mindset, and to really engage head, heart, and hand in a strive for global citizenship. And I will end it here for the sake of time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Froehler. Dr. Pandey, I yield the floor to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Aaryan. I'm thanking you particularly because you have done two good things to me. Number one, you have given me time to speak at the end, and that gives me a lot of material to speak about. You know, if I take one sentence from each one of them, my job is done. And the second good thing you have done is that you have given me a lot of time. Now the entire time is mine. So nobody is under pressure to finish it. So thank you panelists. I was listening to you very intently. Your talks were very engaging, I must say. And what I noticed was that Kuany, put very firmly empathy at the foundation of peace and global citizenship. And when it came to Deepti and Alesse, both of them, they brought about global citizenship and its practical aspects of implementation. And that gave a lot of insight into it. And when it came to Professor Paul, he gave the real nuts and bolts, and not only the nuts and bolts of peace which fix peace, but also those who are getting loosened and disturbing peace. So that was something amazing. And then Monika has given a totally different perspective of SDGs by connecting it with head, hand, and heart. And coming from the Ban Ki-moon Center, she also makes us very emotional and emotionally attached to SDGs, because we know the role that Mr. Ban Ki-moon played in bringing about this, what I have called it a revolutionary intent of the United Nations in the form of these 17 goals. So I think all of you have put this in a great perspective. I would come build a little bit of logic to the whole thing. And I will recite a very famous Sanskrit prayer, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, may all be very happy. Sarve bhavantu niramaya. May all be very healthy. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu. Let all of them be enlightened and cultured. Ma kashit dukh bhag bhavet. May no one suffer from a strife or any kind of, suffering or a strife. Now, this prayer is the foundational philosophy with which we have grown, and that gives us the strength. Now, what it does is, Saint Teresa said that prayer gives us faith, and faith gives us love. Love gives us devotion. Devotion gives us service, and service for all brings peace. So that is the foundation of peace, which we understand, as Paul was asking, that there must be a mirror image of the concept of peace in the West and in the East. So this is the construct, and this is the mirror image of the Western thought in the Eastern thought as to what we mean by peace. And therefore, we come to the point that peace is individual to begin with. So peace with individual will transcend to the peace in the family. Then it goes to neighborhood. It goes to community. It goes to nations. And then it goes to the world as a whole. So that is the trajectory which a simple seed of peace sown in the mind and heart of a young child sprouts into a world peace. So if that is the trajectory, what is the responsibility of the educators like us? What we have to do is that we have to use peace as a critical pedagogical tool for transformation. My refrain has been, with all these years of my experience in education, that we have not been very intentional about peace education. We have done schooling, we have done normal schooling, we have done cognitive schooling, but we have somehow ignored the affective domain of it. And as a result of that, we have not been able to inject the values of peace and the related values in a very, very intentional manner. And I have lamented all these years that any schooling without intentional peace education is futile and at times very, very dangerous also. And therefore, what we need to do is that bring peace education at the center of it and create pedagogical curriculum, the gaming, the new technology, as Monika was talking about, to create a peace education paradigm in the institutions. Now, we are going to have two very distinct advantages of it. When we talk about peace, we are talking about respect for each other. We are talking about gratitude. We are talking about ability to express. We are talking about seeing the differences and yet celebrating the diversity. This is one advantage. The second advantage is that we are developing abilities to communicate. We are developing an attitude of cooperation. We are developing skills as to how to resolve our conflicts. So I think these things are becoming very, very important. And I think Monika or Professor Paul, they were making reference to, what has this COVID done? This COVID has shown us a mirror that, look, your global efficiencies are at one hand and the local resilience is at the other hand. We have to make a very good balance between the two. The creativity and dynamism are going to be the new values which will be respected. And we also have to value at the same time the psychological, social, all these differences and all these sufferings and all these restrictions which will come around as a result of this pandemic. And in these situations, I think our curricular approach to peace education has also got to change. And the second distinct advantage that I referred to was that if we do all these qualities through peace building, I think they will also help our children in developing their cognitive skills. So the world that we are going to live in is not going to be dictated only by the technical qualifications coming out of cognition, but they are going to come out of socio-emotional skills coming out of peace building. So that is something very, very important. And therefore, I must conclude very quickly that UNESCO's 4 pillars of education, and look at the timing of that. That came just 4 years before the dawn of 21st century in the form of Delara's report. And learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, and learning to live together. I think there cannot be a bigger and more profound message for peace in this world. I think we have to come back to it. We have to embrace it, and we have to reach out with the children armed with such qualities in our pedagogy. Once all these things have been attained, then automatically just imagine when our children are brought face to face with their surrounding, with the life, with plants, animals, ecology, their surrounding, then automatically what is going to happen is that we will forget about our own identities. Professor Paul will come from Ireland, Ashok Pandey will come from India, but we will forget it. And we will be more in a way to say that we come from a cosmic citizenship rather than a citizenship which is bounded by some kind of geography. And hence, the global citizenship, which assumes very importance, a great importance, is built on 3 very, very important skills in the children. First, I think Deepti mentioned about it, is interconnectedness. The second, which Kuany mentioned, is about courage to acknowledge the difference and yet compassion to celebrate diversity. And the third is our ability to extend our empathy beyond our own boundaries to feel the pain of someone sitting at a very, very far distance. So these 3 pillars of global citizenship built around peace education is going to be the most crucial thing, in my opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pandey. Now I'm opening the floor to a few questions. So we have limited time, so each panelist would get about a minute and a half to respond. So my first question is directed to Ms. Froehler. So as you know, learning in an atmosphere of fear cannot happen. And this is the same thing was told by Professor Paul in the last panel discussion that we had. In this context, even though, like, you know, we make peace and global citizenship a priority, how exactly do you think we as institutions and organizations embed it practically?
I think there is a lot of room to improve on this one. But what is beautiful is that right now there are certain phenomena that are existing globally that any institution and any individual can relate to. And this is, we share for the first time in our time as a generation, a common narrative. And yes, we have different perspectives on COVID-19. All of us have experienced it differently. But COVID-19 showed us that we are actually more alike than we are distinct. It showed us that we are all, when it comes to the bottom line of it, human. So it shouldn't be too difficult, no matter if it's on like top-down or bottom-up level, to pick people up from where they are in their local context, in their regional context, and explain the whole notion of global citizenship along the lines even of the very prevalent COVID impression and the fear that comes along with it. Practically, of course, the inclusion will mean that systems need to be adapted, educational systems will need to be adapted. And my predictions here are, and I will close with, I have to give you these 4 points. One of them is this narrative has changed and we all can draw on it. This is a massive advantage. The second point is that yes, indeed, we realized as societies we need to be better prepared for pandemic breakouts, and that will find somehow its segue into educational systems, and people will be intrinsically motivated to learn about that and contribute to that. The third part is that all of us are afraid of the economic ripple effect. Some will be hard struck and others won't. And my prediction is that the haves and the have-nots will, unfortunately, this divide will enlarge. And global citizenship education and peace education is exactly the counter movement to narrow that divide again. So it is more necessary than ever. And the fourth element that I need to mention here is that digitalization, as we experience and practice it now, will have to be at the fore for institutions, for individuals, and even for like public entities. They need to be equipped for it in the betterance of raising the chances of humankind to get through pandemics like these easier and smoother when we are out of it again.
Thank you so much, Ms. Froehler. My next question is to Kuany. While I'm making the question, I would also like to highlight the peace in the absence of justice, because Kuany spoke about peace as justice. Peace in the absence of justice and justice in the absence of mercy are just hollow ideals, right? So at the end of the day, a lot of educators know about peace, but how can they develop a greater understanding of peace as not just an absence of war or absence of certain conditions? So what are the practical things that educators can do, Kuany, to foster or prioritize preparing young people for peace and global citizenship?
Yes, that's a tough question. It's a big question. I think anyone who would think has an answer to that question, in my opinion, is sort of, for lack of a better word, deluded to an extent. But I'll attempt to answer it. One is, in my opinion, there is this relationship part of peace that I think Professor Paul brought out, which is if in myself as Kuany, as a teacher, if I'm not able to try and build peace within myself, and it's something that also Professor Pandey brought up, then it is really difficult for me to bring that out in my interaction with students, right? So I have to try as much as I can to build peace within me first, and then with my students. A quick way of doing it, if you're a teacher, in my opinion, is that, and this is something that I've tried in my interaction with young people, which is most of the time is to co-create inclusivity in action, for example, to co-create spaces. So if it is a workshop, if it is a class, for example, okay, could you bring students on board into deciding what is going to be taught for that particular day? Number two, also, could you bring students into discussing very difficult topics by you sharing your own vulnerability in the first place before you instruct them on something? So for me, is this relational co-creation of experiences between the teacher and the students that is a practical way of maybe trying to pass on the idea of peace. Another thing is, you know, what we've been doing, like social emotional competencies, for example, is building these capacities for teachers to be aware of their own emotions and to manage them properly, such that when they interact with students, they can also begin, at least in that interaction in itself, the students can begin to learn that management of emotions is pertinent into trying to have a peaceful interaction with others, for example. So to be mindful, to be empathetic, and then of course to be compassionate, to try and alleviate the suffering that such emotions might be causing in one way or the other. So small mindfulness exercises for yourself, and then for you and your students, small empathy or emotional regulation exercises for yourself, and then with your students, slowly begin to lay the foundation necessary for any peaceful coexistence within an expanded tribe.
Thank you so much, Kuany. My next question is directed at Alesse. Alesse, we do understand that global citizenship is really important. That's one reason why we also have a foundation here. But my question to you is, many people view global citizenship as a top-down model. In the sense, many a times it's an idea of the outside. Like, I'll give you a very simple specific example. When you look at the 3 R's, reuse, recycle, and reduce, there's always an emphasis on recycling. And now the research says that recycling can be more harmful for the environment. So in this context, do you see global citizenship facing backlash as an idea of the elite, or as something that is more of an agenda of the outside? And how can we counter this? So if you can just highlight that, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, Aaron. This is a very interesting question, and we can promote another conference to talk about this. It's quite important, and many thoughts about that. But yes, I know that the main problem about global citizenship is exactly this kind of debate, that is that something that respects culture, respect individuals, and what can we do about barriers and countries, etc., and inside, outside, top, bottom. But that's the reason in my research I'm dealing with dialogue, and dialogue together with values, universal values. In my opinion, that's the way, that's the one possible answer for this, that like it's the meaning we can practice global citizenship, not related to our be separate from our government or different dimensions of our actions, but it's something that all of us, we can practice in some way. And then the big debate about global citizenship now is exactly how to deal with different dimensions. But connecting this to education now is interesting, because now many families, billions of families, they are dealing with children inside their house, inside home, and they need to literally know more about their children. And many families, they are seeing each other and who are you, and they are needing now, they need to connect, they need to reconnect and to re-understanding what's happening. And again, dialogue is one very interesting approach in order to put in this equation, in this context, in order to understand and to put global citizenship into practice. For me, it's almost the only way in which we can solve this question without respecting each other, respecting individualities and cultures, and making it from people to above. That's one talking about that.
Thank you so much, Alesse. My next question is to Deepti. Deepti, you have done research on 3 organizations working on global citizenship. So what has been a commonality between these, and what are the differences that you see, and how this learning could be applied? So if you can do it in less than 2, it would be great help.
So, I was sitting with my master research here. So, all the 3 organizations are implementing the social, emotional, and behavioral aspects, like the 2 main pillars of global citizenship dimension. And if we talk about the similarities and the differences, so I'm going to just wrap it up very quickly. The ways in which global citizenship is being implemented in formal education system and informal. I think the way Global Citizenship Foundation and Akshar Foundation is doing, and UNESCO, it's very unique, but it's very sane. So, for example, UNESCO came up with this kindness campaign. It's not a formal education in which you are implementing global citizenship, but it's an informal way of a campaign. And they also came up with different kind of informal education, like different kind of peace raging campaign and so many others. And for global citizenship, they came up with the 100 acts. So I feel that the commonality is that embedding global citizenship education, implementing it through both the modes, formal education system and informal mode of education system. And when it comes to informal, I have seen in all the 3 organizations, the impact that was created was much higher. For example, in Kindness Campaign for UNESCO, in 100 Acts of Global Citizenship for this Global Citizenship Foundation, and for Akshar, they came up with this meta-teaching idea, and the refusing plastic to and replacing it, like they refused fees, the school fees, and they replaced it with the plastic. So the kids were collecting plastic all over from their community, and they replaced it, the organization replaced it with the fees. So I feel the commonality is that we have to really go creative in terms of formal and informal mode of education. And the differences were that sometimes so my research basically tried to understand that how, if we put a global citizenship education as a priority, which all SDGs these organizations, like how it directly impacts the sustainable development goals. And to my surprise, all these three organizations, at least 8 sustainable development goals, they are impacting too. So obviously, like some are 12 are implementing 8 SDGs, and some are just accelerating 4 SDGs. But a minimum were 8 sustainable development goals who these organizations, through their formal and informal modes of education, they are of global citizenship, they are impacting on. So to conclude, I feel both these are important, formal and informal modes of education of implementing GCED.
All right. So we are very short of time right now. Thank you so much, Deepti. So I'm opening the floor to the attendees. So we have 5 questions here. So we have Mr. Hadaf. Would you like to ask a question directly? If so, please unmute yourself. Hello. All right. So Mr. Hadaf asked this question: how to build peace and global citizenship education in areas like Afghanistan, which are deadly affected by terrorism, and how Global Citizenship Foundation can play its role. Okay, so the first part of the question, any of the panelists can take this question.
I'll attempt that for 2 reasons. One is I do work pertaining to the topic, and number 2, of course, I've experienced conflict in places like Afghanistan. And it's an important question. For me, again, fundamentally, you have to have a few things in place before you can begin to mainstream GCED. And we all agree safety is important. It's almost impossible to mainstream GCED if safety and security is not in place. Number 2, and then this is physical safety and security, which terrorism impedes in a lot of such contexts. Number 2 is the safety and security as a psychological concept, in the sense that even when kids are able to go to class, is that environment safe, first and foremost? And so when you look at, conflict or post-conflict situations like my home country, South Sudan, as well as Afghanistan, it is almost impossible to mainstream GCED until and unless you have these few things in place. But what could also be done is, at least in the curricula that is taught within the schools in such contexts, you could begin to mainstream a few, preliminary core concepts of peace, for example, GCED, such as empathy, such as compassion and things like that. You can begin to do that slowly by slowly. But in the informal sector, there's more opportunities where you can, in a game of football, for example, in a place like Afghanistan, a game of football bringing young people together can provide a lot of refuge, and could also be a methodology you use to pass on the fundamental competencies of, say, global citizenship values. So sports as well as other extracurricular activities, and the informal sector in general can provide a much better space where you can begin to mainstream these competencies as compared to the formal, because for the formal, you would need basic security in place. But, kids in my country still want to play football. And so that's an avenue to use sports as well as other informal contexts, arts, for example, to introduce and build these competencies. I know I've not answered it properly, but that's at least is the way I see it. But it's a very important point.
I'm so sorry I got disconnected. Thank you so much, Kuany, for your insights. So the next question is, can these, moreover with governments having other goals like in Burma and different parts of the world, can this be achieved without governments coming forward? So I would like Ms. Froehler to take this question.
Gladly. The simple answer is, can it be done without governments? Of course not. It will need all of the players. And what we have experienced now in the past years is that some governments have actually taken the leap. We have the examples of Italy and the example of Mexico, who really already mainstreamed, for example, climate change education into all of the curricula. And they have made these strides and were basically samples to many other governments, with different effects of effectiveness, to be in all fairness and to be honest. Can it go without governments? No. But does it mean we have to wait for governments? That's also a no. We should not wait. Movements, and I'm a big proponent of activism. I think movements start with grassroots. And the moment you reach an adaptation point, a tipping point, it normally is reached because masses of people are convinced about an idea. And I truly believe that global citizenship education and peace education is something that in times like these that are a challenge come to the fore. So grassroots, individual level is necessary. I would even vouch for companies need to chip in, academia needs to chip in, NGO, the civil society needs to do its share. We on an individual basis, I love it that Deepti told us she's checking herself, like what can she improve in her own, life. Becoming vegan is probably not everyone's cup of tea, but it is an effort. I know of people who don't buy plastic products anymore in like the European hemisphere. I know of many African activists who are seeking involvement of youth in peace agreements, because often it's just the former fighters that are brokering the conflict resolutions, and youth is completely sidelined, and yet they're making their voices heard. I know of amazing ladies who are reintegrating Boko Haram victims in Nigeria and are giving them schooling education and therefore planting seeds of peace education. I know about samples of girls in India who are talking about issues that are taboo, like menstruation, like child marriage. And they do that, and by that, they actually, from the bottom up, will raise the level of awareness and will manage to do it with their governments, hopefully, eventually, because at the end of the day, it's the people, tendentially, that legitimize the rule. They legitimize the form of government. It needs all of it, but let's not wait for government to do the first strides.
Yeah. Hello, Aaryan, are you there? Aaryan, are you there? I think I must chip in because Aaryan seems to be disconnected. So panelists can hear me? Yeah, fine. So I just, I will fill in for Aaryan for a moment. The questions which have been addressed so far, one is the apprehension around global citizenship. Another is how to reach out to the areas where strife is there and already a lot of problems are there, and who should actually be the stakeholder in it. I think these three are the main questions which have come so far. And the panelists have answered it beautifully. No more addition is required. I'm just extending it to what the Secretary General has said. And he has said that the fury of the virus illustrates the folly of the war. Now, obviously, he was mentioning and referring it to the areas of strife and external wars and all that. But I will give it some kind of a philosophical spin that this war, and I think Monika alluded to it in one way, that this pandemic has brought us all to one level. So it has been a leveler. And therefore, we have to look inside and find out if we are fighting a war with ourselves within. And what could be that war which is preventing peace from flourishing. So if that flourishing of peace is emanating from that internal war within us of accumulation, consumerism, greed, lust, jealousy, prejudice, I think there is a need to tackle that. And if we can tackle that, then probably we will come out very refreshed out of this whole thing. And the second thing I want to add to this is that what has taken us really out of this pandemic, at least in the beginning of this survival period, is our access to technology. And the young generation is, very, very savvy with this technology. And therefore, if they are becoming the ambassadors and spokespersons of peace, I think we can see a real possibility of establishment of peace. And therefore, I see no contradiction between the nationalities and the global citizenship. It is Mahatma Gandhi, our father of the nation, once said that I am born in a particular state of India, so I am citizen of that. I am born in a particular family and community, so my identity is that. Then I'm an Indian, so my identity is that. But I'm a cosmic person. So my citizenship, which overarches all this, is a cosmic citizenship. I think we have to realize that and bring that into the discourse of our curriculum and pedagogy to make this peace and global citizenship flourish hand in hand. So I thought I'll give you this comment, but I think Professor Paul, you can take some of the questions. Somebody has asked, what should be the goal once we want to develop peace and global citizenship? What are those one or two tangibles that we should have in mind to reach there through the vehicle of peace and global citizenship? If Professor Paul, you can take this question.
Great, thanks. I'm going to sort of build on a number of the points that were raised in previous contributions on this that are very striking. The point of the war within that you mentioned, and the notion of learning to be, that I think we need an intrapsychic space. So the war within, I would be seeing a diametric space in our awareness and consciousness, and we need to restructure. I think you also mentioned compassion. I would argue, as well as compassion and empathy, which are the concentric space is a condition for that in our experience. I also want to relate back to the point on fear that was asked earlier. In many ways, the opposite to fear is trust, and trust is again an assumed connection of concentric space. So the basic question is, how can we promote trust and compassion in our modes of experience, in our education systems, as concentric spatial systems? So there's the intrapsychic growth dimension, but there's also, I think, in the school system, we have a great opportunity to create concentric spatial schools. My new book here on inclusive systems as concentric space emphasizes these issues. But I want to sort of broaden it beyond, I think, just values, because my concern here is that if you try to tell young people what the values need to be, they will tell you no, because you have to. I like the term experiences. I think we need to broaden our modes of experience. That's why I argued for outdoor learning education earlier. We need to expand our capacity to connect, our experiential capacity to connect. And I don't think the message of just trying to kind of brainwash young people with a values agenda is going to work with them. You see research to say that when that approach is taken, people can reject that because people don't like to be told how to think and feel. So I think it's about creating a relational space of openness to connection, compassion, that is a mode of being. Concretely in the school as well, I would like to see, this is not just a curricular issue, and obviously it goes wider than the school to the society, but within the school, one of our reports to the European Commission has emphasised we need committees, driving committees in the school that can be focusing on school climate issues, school climate change, which means the warmth of atmosphere of relations in the school. It may address issues such as discrimination. Discrimination is a diametric space in the school, and there's a lot of research in Europe recently on discriminatory bullying by teachers of students. So how do we create equal school environments where everyone feels respected, included, where their voice is heard? These are all concentric spatial systems, not diametric spatial systems. So we need to promote inclusive school and societal systems as concentric space and foster trust. I think without trust, you are going to get aggressive responses. So the question is, where are the losses of trust in our society? How has trust been broken? And how can we heal those trusts?
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Paul. We'll take just one more question. And that is this beautiful concept of peace and global citizenship. How can we achieve it without neutralizing biases and stereotypes? So this is one question which is typed in the box, and any one of you can take it. So who is going to take it?
Yeah, I'll attempt the first part at least, then my other colleagues can join me. So most of the time, biases or prejudices, they breed from what you would say, being closed within your own world and not experiencing the other. When you do not experience the other, your biases and fears and prejudices against the other begin to build. And so first and foremost, people should begin to broaden the circle. People should go out, meet new people, interact with them, engage in new cross-identitarian experiences that at least begin to break your biases slowly by slowly. So if you think you do not know anything about, say, a person from Africa, and you're therefore biased or you fear someone from Africa, the first thing you need to do is meet someone from Africa. Try as much as you can. It's a challenge, of course, but you should try and get out and meet that someone from Africa. If your fear is B or C or D, again, you do the same thing. And so to answer that question precisely, it's almost impossible to be a global citizen until and unless you're able to challenge or go beyond such biases that you have for the other or for things that you do not understand or you've not experienced. So experience them first and then build from there.
Absolutely. I fully agree with you, Kuany. And I think that is where this issue of dialogue, which Alesse was mentioning, and creating these concentric spaces which Professor Paul was talking about. And, when we are building these global competencies, we are very clearly mentioning there that if we really have to develop peace and global citizenship, the competencies such as knowing each other. So knowing about the history and geography and polity and economics of various regions of the world, also learning at least one language other than the dominant language which you are communicating, and developing sensitivity, around the issues which are not only local in nature, but also global in nature. I think these competencies will help us in one way or the other in removing those biases, as Kuany has very rightly pointed out.
No, just one example. Sorry to take extra 30 minutes.
Yes,
so
please.
In February, and Aaryan was there as well. In February, we brought together 35 young people from the South Asian region. So from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. When before we met, what we did is we sort of combine and merge people to share rooms or to be roommates for a week, for example. And so I ended up putting an Indian and a Pakistani to share a room together, and the same thing for a lot of other people. When they first met, some people actually sent me an email and they were like, can I change my room? I was like, yes, you could, but do you really want to? Isn't this a worthwhile challenge? And so a few pushed and changed their rooms, but if almost 75% refused to. And at the end of the week, they had become so connected, so together, that even after the workshop, they are now implementing projects together. So, you need to create these spaces. Don't tell people that this is how you want to challenge your biases, but create spaces that allow for people to diffuse or to challenge their own biases and prejudices as much as you can.
Could I come in there just on that, Kuany? Because I think it's a very important point. And in social psychology, they would say that two things are needed to overcome prejudice and stereotyping. So one is contact, but contact alone is not enough. It needs to be over in a structured way of cooperation. So cooperation tasks can bring people together. So when you have contact plus a framework of cooperation for common activities, then you can help overcome what I would call the diametric structure between in-groups and out-groups. We need to change that diametric mode of being.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Come to almost to the end of the program, and I'm very sorry we have lost Aaryan for some very, very inexplicable reasons. I'll discover it later and I'll let you know what has happened. But my heartfelt thanks to all the panelists and to all those who have participated through Zoom and YouTube. Paul, you are raising hand. You want to say something? Or you're fine? Okay. So thank you very much. And now that we are talking about peace and global citizenship, I intend to end this program with a prayer. And I will only recite the English translation of that Sanskrit prayer, and that will mark the end of this session. But thank you all very much. The prayer is like this: let us walk together hand in hand. Let us talk together with love and compassion. Let our minds understand each other well. Let us live together in peace through mutual sharing and acceptance. I think that is the wish that all of us have here for all of you, for your families, for the world at large, and to all the participants. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will let you know about our next session. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure, sir.
It was such a delight having you all.
It was a
here.
pleasure. My co-panelists, it was a pleasure sharing this space with you, and we should be in touch.
Thank you.
Yes.
We shall be in touch. Definitely. Thanks a lot. God bless you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Take
Deepti,
care.
Monika, Alesse,
Thank
Professor
you.
Paul, and Kuany.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, Aaryan is back.
Oh, Aaryan, are
Thank
you
you.
back?
Yes, sir. I mean, say we had a mini type. What do you call? There was a gushing wind. I think the systems are down here.
Good.
So-
You are back. You just say thanks to the panelists, and we have just wound it up. But we were all worried about you and your sweet voice. You can say bye-bye and thank you. We'll be happy.
Bye. Bye, everyone. I'll respond to. I'll get back to you on email, and to all our participants. You will receive your certificates within 36 hours. So thank you so much, and I wish you all the very best. And to end it all, I just have one comment to make. There are 5 things that educators can keep in mind while while you're trying to practically foster peace and global citizenship education. As you understand, we are in a very critical time right now. The first thing that educators can do is break down enemy images and rehumanize so-called adversaries that are being created at this point in time. Like I told you last time, avoid calling people as corona.
Okay. So I think the area in which Aaryan and I live is affected by a very huge storm and dust, and probably his internet is giving trouble. So thank you very much once again. God bless you all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Pandey. Thank you very much.
Thank
bye
you.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pandey.
Thank you. Thank you, Deepti
Paul,
and Alesse.
Dr.
Nice
Pandey,
meeting
thank you
you.
very much.
Professor
Thank
Paul
you.
will be in touch.
Thank you as well,
Yeah.
Dr. Pandey. Okay, thank you so much. And I hope we could all stay in contact in some way.
Yes,
Some
yes.
way our panelists
Obviously.
can
Yeah.
get together. And it's great to meet you.
Kuany,
Absolutely.
Kuany will meet again and very soon. And Monika, have you left?
Yeah, I think she has left.
Okay. Thanks a
Yes,
lot.
let's stay in touch. Let's stay in touch. Aaryan
Absolutely.
can do that. Yeah, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank
It was a
you.
pleasure.
Bye bye.